Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar, What's on the Horizon for Correctional and Reentry Education. Before I turn it over to our presenter, Jeff, I just want to give a shout out to our partners at Essential Ed and our other partners at Origin for sponsoring this amazing webinar. And I will turn it over to Jeff Abramowitz. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Beth. Well, let me get my slide deck up. Give me 1 second. Get this out of the way. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am super excited to be here. My name is Jeff Abramowitz, and it is truly a new day in correctional and reentry education. We're going to be diving into a lot of issues today. So first thing, I want you to pull out, if you have a life vest anywhere near you, I want you to grab it and put it on because we're going to be going at rocket speed today and talking about so many good things. I will also say that we'll be monitoring the chat from time to time, but it's just me today. So work with me a little bit on the chat end, but I hope to get to everybody, all your questions. We're really in uncharted waters today, and I'm going to be your cruise guide today. I wanted to be thinking today to kind of get us set about what are the things that you really wish could be changed or improved in the correctional and reentry setting. And some of you are saying, oh man, I don't even know where to start. There's probably tons of them that are right top of mind, but I want you to be thinking about them today. And if from time to time I hit on a chord and you want to throw it in the chat box, please feel free to do so. Little disclaimer today also is I promise you, I shared my slide deck with everybody, and I will make sure that everyone that's joining us today gets a copy of the slide deck because at the very back of the slide deck are all these resources that you're going to want to hold on to and refer back to, but they support a lot of the data, all of the data that I'll be talking about today as we kind of see what's on the horizon. So, if you do have questions, again, put them in the chat box. I do want to ask people to be very mindful of language. If you are going to, refer to people that are justice impacted, there's no such thing as an ex-felon or ex-con or anything like that. We really want to be recognized. We're just people that have gone through the justice system. They're just individuals. We want to bring that humanity back. And if you have a comment or something you want to say, please feel free to throw it in the chat box. And again, I'm going to try and keep it in there. You can go ahead and put your name or where you're from, or even if people want to connect, put your email in the chat box. That'd be awesome as well. So let's get rolling and let's start diving into this. So I think the first thing I kind of want to just lay out there is the why. And why does all this matter? Why are we even talking about correctional education? And I think we have to frame the issue correctly, which is that there are 1.9 million people in this country that are currently incarcerated, and there are so many more. About a third of our country has a criminal background or criminal past. And the importance of education today, especially literacy, numeracy, is, in my mind, is one of the keys to stopping recidivism, to stopping the revolving doors of our prisons and jails that have been going for years now. So really being mindful of the fact that education is super important and the role that all of you play, whether you're an administrator, whether you're an educator, whether you're a student, a training professional, you all have a special place in this environment or in this ocean. And we all need to work together to solve some of these problems. But the problems are very real. And we are really changing what's happening now on the forefront of correctional education, and the tides are beginning to turn a little bit. Today, we're going to be talking about kind of the foundational skills and the importance of literacy and numeracy. We're going to really be looking at post-secondary education and what's happening in that arena. This movement towards career pathways and workforce alignment is just so important today because we want people to be in careers and we want them to be successful. So thinking about that alignment. And then, of course, the obvious things like digital literacy and how important that is, and navigating reentry when people walk out the door and connecting them to education. also data and evaluation and looking at evidence-based practices, as well as we'll be talking some funding issues today too, and things you may need to know if you're struggling for funding and looking for funding for your programs. And then the last is some special kind of things and target populations, individuals that have a disability, or those special populations we want to talk about. And then last, really diving into, well, what's next? I call it the and then what? What's coming down the pike? So we'll be diving into some of that. So I am your ship captain today, and we'll be going on the seas, and we'll be talking about a bunch of different things. But I think in order for you to know my perspective, you really have to know a little bit about me. Some of you I know are on the call know a little bit about me, but I do want to share my story briefly. So before we dive into things, but I was a trial lawyer in Philadelphia for a little over 20 years and made some really poor choices in life. So I don't believe people make mistakes. I think people make choices, and sometimes they're not so great. And that's how we learn. Einstein has a great line. He says, if you make 10 bad choices a day, you're just not trying hard enough. And I made some bad choices that handed me a federal indictment and also accepting responsibility and a 5-year stay in a federal prison. I'm home 10 years, but when I was incarcerated, I began to teach. And I found my passion for education and working with the men that I lived with, teaching GED math, teaching everything. I taught over 60 classes while I was away and reading a lot, read over 1,000 books and wrote a lot and learned so much from the people that I was with on the journey. I returned home 10 years ago and lived in a homeless shelter. And then my very first job was teaching GED math in North Philadelphia at the corner of Broad and Lehigh. And $7 an hour, it wasn't much, but boy, did I learn so much from the students that came in our doors. I eventually became a director of workforce development there and then moved on to become an executive director of a large workforce agency in Philadelphia. And the same day I got my job as an executive director, I also got a call from the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, COABE. And Sharon Bondi called me and she said, Jeff, would you think about starting the Prison Literacy Committee? And I was like, bring it on, let's do it. And I did. We started the Prison Literacy Committee, and I'll talk a little bit about the work that's continuing to be done by Danielle Cox at COABE in that front. So I started that, have done work with the U.S. Department of Education as a subject matter expert, worked on the IET and Corrections Project. I was a moderator for links for the Correctional Reentry Education Communities of Practice, and then a whole bucket list of things after that. But the true passion now has been all about education. I serve as the CEO of a national nonprofit called the PD Green Program, which does tutoring and educational support inside and outside of prisons and jails across the country. And the model is so simple. We take college students and volunteers from across the country, and we bring them with us inside of facilities and work with people on the way out to help people get smarter, whether it's a GED or a high school diploma, or whether it's at math, reading, digital literacy, financial literacy, you name it, we're helping them achieve their educational goals or career goals so that they can move on and become successful. So the lens I wear is really from that of somebody that's justice impacted, and that lived experience is so important. Because as you're going to hear today, a lot of the things that we need to understand are the challenges of people that have gone through the system and that are sharing what the way the system impacted them. What is it that they saw and they see in this work as they come home? And we're going to get there. So the COABE cruise ship. I don't know if any of you followed, but Bonnie recently, Sharon and James went on a cruise and kind of gave me this theme of our cruise ship today. But the Prison Literacy Committee is now evolving into a correctional education community of practice, and there's a cohort coming out of that. I hope that you'll follow it because that it is specifically geared towards correctional educators. It's how can we support you in the classroom do a better job? What resources do you need? What tools do you need at your fingertips? So we're beginning to really push and make that tide change even faster by giving you the resources so that you can do a better job and your students can succeed. So let's dig into this, the why. And these are some basic, in the United States, we know that there are 75 million plus low skilled in numeracy, 51 million people low skilled in literacy, 3 million people that lack basic workforce skills, 30 million that lack a high school diploma, and 28 million that lack digital literacy skills. And if anyone would ever question how important adult literacy is in our country, just look at these numbers and think about all the people that we could touch by helping getting them smarter. The other reality is that the impact adult education has in our world is that, it runs the gamut from being more likely to be unemployed, to be in poverty, to 4 times more likely to be in poor health, but 8 times more likely to be incarcerated, to be in our prisons and jails, if you have low literacy skills. Um, we do we do currently incarcerate more people than anyone in the world. There currently are 1.9 million people that are incarcerated in the United States, and about 500,000 of them are in jail or prisons, and mostly is in jails, and they've not even been convicted yet. They sit inside of our prisons and jails, and they're not convicted yet. They're there simply because they can't afford bail, and they will work their way through the system and then hopefully get their own trial and destiny to be determined before they get to be released and then eventually come home. There are about a third of our country that have a criminal background or criminal history, and about 600,000 individuals are released each and every year from our prisons and jails. Many of them, overwhelming 91% of them, report some kind of food insecurity or are released with some kind of opioid drug addiction or alcohol addiction that needs to be tended to. It's funny, but when years ago, when we closed our behavioral health hospitals across the country, all we really did was force people onto the streets and into our prisons and jails. And until we start really dealing with some of the root causes of opioid addiction and drug and alcohol addiction, I fear that a lot of the problems that we have in our criminal justice system will remain. Um, we spend so much money on our criminal justice system every year in our prisons and jails. About $60 billion are spent housing people. And tragically, with all the work that we do in correctional education, more than 2/3 of those that are going to be released will within 3 to 5 years, many of them were going to find their way back inside our prisons and jails, and that is just not acceptable. It's not acceptable because there are solutions, there are ways of dealing with it, and we're going to dive into some of them today. But the first thing I think we should recognize is that when we talk about foundational skills, we really are in a foundational skills crisis in this country. So many individuals that are justice impacted, 70 don't have or haven't completed high school or classified as having low literacy levels. And yet, although this is a really old study, I think it's very apparent. But the data shows that about 43% of those people that take some educational programming inside a prison and jail are more likely not to go back. They're 43% better chance of not returning if they just get some educational supports while they're incarcerated. And that in and of itself is a super important to really highlight education and the impact that education has in this discussion. When we talk about prison education programs, 64% of those that are enrolled are academically eligible to get into post-secondary programs. And as the Pell Grant program was opened back up, about 700,000 people behind the walls were now eligible. Yet so many people, 58% of those that are behind the walls don't complete an education program. 9% complete a post-secondary program. Only 13 to 15% complete a credential or an associate's degree. And yet, if you ask people inside the walls of our prisons and jails, 70% of those men and women, they want education. They want something going on inside the walls. Recently, the PD Green program was awarded the contract for the city of New York, and we'll be providing all the educational support services in Rikers Island in New York, and super proud of that. But I was recently up on a visit at Rikers Island, and as I'm walking through the units, you rarely see this, but there were men that came over to me, were giving me a hug and just saying, "Thank God we're getting some programming. We really want to get our high school diploma. We're looking at a training program we want to do," and really understanding that the importance of programming inside of the walls psychologically, it's giving people something to do. For me, it was a way of not only doing my time, but it was a way of doing something that I felt bettered myself. It gave me some direction to what I wanted to do next. I was learning. I felt I was productive in an environment where you could probably sit in your cell all day and do your time and then come home and not do anything at all. It is so important mentally for you to get involved, to have programming available in a real way that you can better yourself and move on. And those kinds of things are super, super important. Um, so why is it really important? Well, I think there's some common sense things that are evident. One is no question, education reduces recidivism. It stops that revolving door going through. There's also the fact that when you get smarter inside of a prison or a jail, you're more likely to have some employment opportunities when you walk out the door. It improves your mental health and your self-esteem. I was really proud when I talked to my family and let them know that I was teaching and that I just started a new class, or I graduated a bunch of students, or they got their high school diploma. There's this mental health aspect of being in a classroom and helping people. Oftentimes, we're told all of their lives that they were dumb, they were stupid, they couldn't do this, they couldn't figure it out, they didn't have the skill set, they weren't smart enough, and all of a sudden they're in a classroom where they're realizing they can do it, and all their lives they've been misdirected. It is also part of this notion that, we need to think about breaking the cycle of poverty. And part of that is having safer communities and the social benefits, obviously, of saving money in our society, not only from the incarceration end, but also from the tail end of, all the support services that go into it and all. It is a big business. And one of the things I would direct you to, I linked this study, but there was a recent report that came out that highlighted, and it's by the Prison Policy Initiative, and it's following the money of mass incarceration. I put the link in, you'll get it, but it was done in 2026. But it talks about all the ways that we spend money in our systems, in our correctional and in our justice systems, and why this is really a money-driven system. There's a picture in this slide deck if you're watching, and I'm so proud of this, but this is a woman who was Student of the Year in Pennsylvania last year, and she was tutored by the PD Green program. She got up and accepted that award in Pittsburgh last year at the PACE conference, and she stood up, and in front of her was the young woman you see next to her, her granddaughter. Her granddaughter's 6 years old. And she was so proud of grandma, who's getting Student of the Year in Pennsylvania. I just can't tell you. What do you think the chances are that her granddaughter is going to go grow up and she's going to go to school and she's going to get her high school diploma and she's going to be thinking about grandma, how proud she was that grandma went back and got her education. So those are the kind of things that are just immeasurable. There's just no return on investment for something like that because the work that we all do in this space are individuals like this that are going out and they're changing for generations the way they look at correctional and reentry education. And then bottom line is, man, it's just the right thing to do. We recently gone through this trend on the horizon that we've seen, which is the return of Pell Grants to post-secondary education, and also we're now seeing the Pell Grants for workforce are coming into play. There are a ton of higher education and prison programs across the country, and I would say that if you're not familiar with them, that you should get online, and there's a link in some of my material that has all of the higher education and prison programs in our country. We work with many of them around the country, and those programs they're so impactful for people going through them. But there's a ripple effect that happens inside when students see that, they're going for their high school diploma, and then right next to them is somebody that's in their next cell or in their table when they're eating, and they're recognizing that person's now going to college and getting, going towards their college degree or a bachelor degree. There is this notion now that, just getting your high school diploma inside is not enough. Sometimes you have an opportunity to go to college and you got to be thinking about it. There's also this quality assurance piece of education that's happening where higher education and prisons and universities are starting to dive in now and recognize this untapped talent pool of people that are really smart, that really could make unbelievable undergraduate students and give them a true career pathway upon release. So understanding that bridge, super super proud of a college bridge program that we have, which is really getting an understanding that sometimes just because you have your high school diploma doesn't mean you're ready for college. And we need to be intentional about helping people bridge from high school to college. And that sometimes means, giving them prerequisite help that they're not using their Pell dollars up on. So when they get to their major in a year or a year and a half or 2 years from now, there's still funding available through FAFSA. So we want to be careful about setting people up for success and also mindful of setting them up for failure. So the wave of adult literacy and adult education in our country is not just about what we're seeing post-secondary. Obviously, we're setting people up, and we should recognize too that, what's happening on the post-secondary end is that a lot of times, the adult basic education requirements of a high school diploma are mandatory, mandated that before you move further, or even consider it, you're going to need to have, yourself grounded in that basic education. But we're also seeing this unbelievable movement or wave towards working with career pathways and getting people into career pathways and workforce alignment. I would encourage you to do this. Um, I want you to write down the word job, and then I want you to put a big X through it. Because I don't, in my world, believe that we should be thinking about putting people into jobs after we help get them smarter. We should not be thinking about that at all. We should think about how do we help people find careers? There is no question, and all the reports and data that's out there support this, that if you find someone, help someone find an opportunity or a career that they love to do, that they're going to stick with it and they're going to stay in that career opportunity. If you just throw them in a job in a fast food restaurant or something they really don't want to do at all, the chances are they're not going to stay there very long. And in fact, they're going to find themselves often looking for trouble or getting into trouble as that they had gotten into in the past. The GED or HSC first model means that before we think about, moving or transitioning people into a career pathway, that we first need to make sure that they have enough math and reading skills in order to get their high school diploma and transition forward into that career pathway. There's also a big movement right now for credential programming, and we're seeing a lot of organizations that are looking at different types of credential programming. We're talking about a bunch of them today. But one of the things I would ask you to look at is those industry recognized credentials that are really the tomorrow. I call them the tomorrow. They're the tomorrow jobs, tomorrow career opportunities. There is a report that was issued by Burning Glass, and again, don't worry, I'll provide it to you. And it's measuring what matters most. It just came out in February, and it's a framework for evaluating non-degree career credentials. And what it does is it looks at the career credentials of tomorrow, not just the past. We're used to seeing the CDLs and the serve safes that are culinary, and then the construction NCCER, which is a partner of COABE's. We're familiar with them. We see them a lot. People want to be into carpentry. I get it all. But we should be focusing on what are the career credentials of tomorrow? What are the things that are really going to drive the things of tomorrow? And looking at things like virtual reality, and there's so many different movements in robotics and advanced manufacturing. So take some time and really look into the credential program itself and see, is it really appropriate for people that are justice impacted? And sometimes you may find that a program, just because it sounds good and it probably will give them, a pretty good living when they come home and when they're out on their own. The truth is that there may not be a lot of opportunity out there, or it may be one that has occupational licensing requirements that doesn't allow people that are justice impacted to actually do that job. It bothered me unbelievably that in Pennsylvania, for the longest time, they had a restriction on people that wanted to get relicensed after they left prison to be a barber. Now, that just made no good sense to me at all. Like a barber, I'm not sure the connection from the criminal justice or occupational licensing end, but be really careful when you're looking at credentials. The first thing you want to do is you want to check out, is this credential something that is appropriate for people that are justice impacted? And there are some things that just may not be. And the logistics of that come into play. For example, people always talk about CDL driving, which is wonderful. It's a great career opportunity for people coming home. But if you've just come home, it may not be the best thing in the world, because if you're not allowed to travel outside of the state, when you get to that Pennsylvania-Ohio border and your tractor trailer, what exactly do you do? And are you going to get violated every time you drive forward? So being really careful and intentional about the credential and whether they can do it. I had the privilege of working with the U.S. Department of Education for the last number of years on the IET and correction model. We'll talk about that, but I think it's a wonderful model that we should all be thinking about embedding in all of our work as we bring in both education and career development or career readiness into the play. There right now is a ton of money in apprenticeships out there. One of my very good friends is John Colburn, Apprenticeships for America. And if you're not familiar, check out Apprenticeships for America. John is wonderful, but yesterday they released the regulations for apprenticeships. There's some new regulations that came out you might want to check out. But are apprenticeships really justice friendly? Are they really appropriate? I would say pre-apprenticeships probably, but they need to lead to an apprenticeship. And the apprenticeship model may not necessarily be the best thing in the world for people that are justice impacted. And the reason is that in many apprenticeship programs, there is not funding that's available that pays for individuals to get smarter along the way, or to pay for themselves, or to help with housing and reentry support and all those services. So be careful when you're diving into an apprenticeship. You want to get somebody that's justice impacted, and you want to ask them the hard questions like, if you were in this program, what do you think? How would it work? What are the things I'm not seeing? And again, you also want to prioritize those high industry, high priority sectors that are really going to lead to the jobs of the future and not just jobs of today. And then Workforce Pell is on its way. So you want to be mindful of Workforce Pell and its integration, but it is potentially a funding opportunity for a lot of our educators. The other piece that is sort of, so forgive me, I went away to prison and I lost my filter. And one of the things I want to say is that, when apprenticeships came out, the one thing that truly bothers me is that there's not more of an integration and accountability on the education end. We should be building education into every apprenticeship in depth so that people are reaching not only their occupational goals, but really all of their educational goals, so that they're not just getting that entry level job, but they're now prepared to be a supervisor, a manager, an owner, and all the way up. And then the last thing is really we need to be thinking about how do we change culture in all of this. I'm really excited. I'm hyped up for today, but I'm hyped up because I'm in Chicago at the ICAE conference, and I went to visit this morning a IBEAN, which is it's coffee making company, and they hire and retain, it's called I Have a Bean, and they roast coffee beans, and they are all people that are justice impacted that run the operation. And I was talking to the owner, Pete Leonard, and we met with him. And besides having amazing coffee, I asked Pete, tell me about his mission. And he said, Jeff, up until last week, I really didn't get my mission right because they give free coffee out. They're in a neighborhood in Chicago, but they give free coffee out to the community and they sell their coffee beans through distribution. And the one thing that Pete said to me was, I've been getting it wrong. He said, it's really not about hiring people that are formerly incarcerated. It's really about changing culture. It's about getting people to understand and see that everyone that walks comes out of a prison or jail is just a person. They're just an individual that made some choices that landed them in a certain way. And I really appreciated his view on that. The IET programs, integrated education and training, there's some great resources out there, but it just makes really good sense. It's providing adult literacy activities, adult education, and workforce development. So imagine a carpenter being trained at the same time he's learning fractions, and then we're also teaching him how to be prepared for the workforce and that career preparedness piece, which is amazing. And really proud of the work I did with Octay on that. And I would suggest that if you're thinking about a model in your education program, that integrating workforce training and an IET model is one of the best things that can happen in this world. I want to talk a little bit about the C's of digital literacy because we are now in a place where digital literacy is front and center. And I've yet to get a really good answer of why we don't mandate digital literacy in every prison and jail in our country. And we certainly can do it. A matter of fact, the PD Green program several months ago brought on a gentleman who's serving 10 years inside of a Maine prison, and he's brilliant. And he's one of our instructors. And he's an instructor that's inside, and he gets paid a full living wage just like any of our other staff, and sends it home to care for his family. But why are we not doing digital literacy in every capacity that we can inside the walls? I know that Origin is one of the sponsors for today. What a great company. They're not the only ones that are providing content, but secure tablets are one thing. And again, my filter, secure tablets are great inside of our prisons and jails, but truthfully, I'm not sure I know anyone that's left a prison or jail that is in a workforce or at home and pulls out his tablet to use. We should be getting people used to working on Chromebooks or working on laptops, and we can do it in a secure and safe way. So, although secure tablets are there, and I think they're going to be there for a while, a lot of people have invested in them. I think we should start a movement of getting people into and getting laptops and Chromebooks inside so that individuals can start being closer to what reality is when they walk out the door. We're also seeing this movement towards being accountable, learning management systems, and putting content as Origin and Essential Ed are doing, making sure that there are tons of content on those tablets and inside of the walls. And it does have a tremendous impact. The first thing we tell people when they come home is go get a job. And we have them sit down at a computer and ask them to download the resume or cut and paste or, get online and have a Gmail account and all these really things that we take for granted. We shouldn't. We should be asking the question is, how do we help people get smarter? And what does digital literacy inside the walls look like? And how can we help it as it builds out? So the argument that security restrictions as far as the internet access is just blown out of the water by some states. In states like Maine, where they have an open internet, it can be done. We have to have the will to do it. And organizations are beginning to see that we can open internet access inside the walls. And it is not as much a security threat as we think it might be. We should also continue to put on more and more content like Essential Ed has on the tablets that are inside. Technology behind the walls is super important, as is peer and volunteer tutoring. Interesting that, one of the things that happened when we got the contract at Rikers Island was to solve the problem. We know there are staffing priorities inside our prisons and jails. We also know that there's a shortness. There's funding costs being cut across the criminal justice complex in our criminal justice setting. I get it. But there are easy ways to solve the problem. One is what we do. For teachers that are understaffed, we provide tutors that help them get smarter one-on-one to meet their goals. We train people inside to be our tutors so that when there is a lockdown or something happening, learning can still go on. So there are smart things that can happen that we can do that really can continue to build the system using peer mentors inside, using people and even paying them for it so that they can be our credible messengers inside the walls is one easy way. And then there's another way. I often hear the argument, well, we can't move people into classes. We can't move them in classrooms. We don't have enough guards, or there's a problem here, or there's a security issue here, whatever it is. And I would suggest, why not just bring education into the units? So that there are places in the units that are dedicated for education. So people don't have to rely upon guards to move them out through security. And there are ways of going about, and that was just one suggestion. There are a lot of other ways and things that are behind this movement or this wave. Understanding blending learning models, where we're working both in a virtual and a live setting, where we're helping people learn hands-on as well as, over the internet and when they come home. Understanding that there are better platforms out there now that are being, with different ways of tracking what you're doing so that I call it the and then what? When someone walks out of a prison or jail, and then what? Like what happens? Well, those content providers that were working behind the walls, the students should have the ability to get to that material when they come home. So if they're this close to getting their high school diploma, this close to getting their GED, they can get onto that platform when they're at home, in their library, in their reentry program, in their adult education provider, wherever they are, and they're able to finish what they started. So understanding that platform, but with the reality that when they walk out the door, it shouldn't stop. There needs to be this continuum of care. I also am a big fan of contextualized learning tools. I think that adult learners in particular learn better when it's put in a context that they can understand. Virtual reality is another great way of learning where people can actually experience it. I had the chance and opportunity to get on a VR program recently for a CDL program, and I was on driving that truck and I crashed a few times, no big deal, but boy, did I get a good understanding of what was involved in driving the tractor trailer. And then again, providing digital literacy supports across the spectrum as we travel through. Reentry navigation is, again, I call it the and then what. But what happens when a learner, one of your students, leaves the walls of the prison or jail? What happens when they leave your classrooms on the outside if you're in a reentry program? There's no question, again, that digital literacy skills become important because over 90% of all jobs require some still skill set in the digital literacy world. But when people come home, man, I didn't realize this until I was in a shelter. I did not realize how many barriers there are to people coming home. Everything from feminine products for women to housing, to getting a vehicle and transportation, to even getting identification. And why we don't give everyone identification when they leave a prison or jail, I have no idea. But if they're we don't think if we don't know who, or we're not sure who they are, then I think we have a bigger problem than we think we have. But we should be giving everyone identification when they walk out the jail or prison, and they're able to use that identification to do everything they need, like set up a bank account or get food stamps and SNAP benefits or whatever they might need. Um, there's no question, too, that unemployment is directly impacted for those that have left our prisons and jails. And there is a 27% unemployment rate for people that are coming home. And that to me is just not acceptable. We have more jobs in this country today than we have people to fill them. And yet, what do? We're, they're unemployed. They're out there. This untapped talent pool is something that we have to recognize. And recognizing them means not just putting them in a job, but shifting the tide is understanding that they could very well have a housing issue, that they could very well have a medical, addiction, or care issue that needs to be addressed. They could need additional educational support. They could need clothing or transportation or legal support. Like all of these things are part of this ocean that surrounds someone that's justice impacted. And it's not until we're able to navigate all of these that success happens, that we begin to understand like what it really means to successfully re-enter and come back into our communities. Um, so that holistic approach and really looking at everything also means, as educators, really being accountable by data. If I was to ask any of you on this webinar today, how do you know you were successful? How do you know you made a difference? How do you know you had an impact? That is a question that funders across the country are asking and want to know. And trust me, if we were able to do a better job of saying, you know what, John got his high school diploma with us while he was inside, and now he's a supervisor at this place. And we were able to say where he went to and what the return on investment is. Those are the things that not only funders want to know, but we all need to be accountable for. We need to be accountable to say that the work we're doing is impactful, but we need to prove it. I do believe a person without data is just another person with an opinion. And evaluations and evidence-based policy practices, it shouldn't begin 5 years after a program. Embed that evaluation work day one. Why do we wait 5 years to figure out what we've been doing wrong? Let's figure it out early on so we can fix it and make it better. There are things that are in on the waves that you should be aware of that could be great, as far as making some changes in the system, allowing good time credits for education, providing resources and supplies for those people that need it inside, incorporating tutoring opportunities across the board, not only through places like PD Green, but getting medical students involved and helping tutor people on healthcare related issues, and really making tutoring a core component of what happens behind the walls, preparing them. Get ready, get set, get out. When you walk out the door, understanding the supports that you need and how you're going to navigate them. Providing an education coordinator, an education navigator, a career navigator, somebody that will help people kind of move around and understand what they don't see and how to get across some of those hurdles. We should be streamlining education reentry support programs on the outside. So when someone walks out the door, this is where you need to go to. You want to go to this provider. You want to see Mr. A. He's going to help you with this. So you want to make that direct connection. Helping them sign up with benefits. So when they walk out the door, they already have their healthcare benefits that are on the way. I think the most underpaid individuals in our entire criminal justice complex are our teachers. And those people doing the work of education support, both inside and outside of the walls. We need to do a better job compensating our educators so that they are proud and they're putting in those hours that are it's daunting, and I recognize it, but we should be rewarding them as we launch new programs, increase those salaries in your budgets, and as you ask for some of that funding, provide more professional development for them, and employ this pay to learn model for people that are justice impacted, where they're benefiting directly from some of that work. Um, I want to just briefly talk about artificial intelligence and say that AI is here to stay. So I don't care who you are. Unless you have your head in the sand somewhere in the ocean or in an island, you have to recognize that AI is a tool that, man, could this be helpful for people coming home and in the education space? So as educators, understanding or helping students develop learning paths, adaptive learning experiences, even online AI tutoring and asking questions. I do it all the time. If I'm not sure about how to work a math problem, I'm asking AI to help me solve it. Assessment tools and job readiness simulations, language literacy support, vocational training opportunities in this realm, progress tracking, and actually seeing how people are doing, taking your data and feeding it into AI and seeing what it looks like I want to talk about data for a second because data-driven decision making is super, super important. We just got done, and a big shout out to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but we got the BJA grant in one of our facilities, and we just finished a data sharing agreement with the Commonwealth where we're able to get essential data that shows the work that we're doing. So let's be mindful, when we start a program, we need to prove that the program is of value. And data sharing agreements are super important. And they're also something that we don't think about until sometimes the program's already launched. And my suggestion is let's think about it earlier. Let's get that data sharing agreement right on the front table as part of the proposal so that everyone knows this is what we need to know in order to figure out if we're successful and if your students are going to be successful. There are also special populations in when we talk about individuals who have a disability and other special populations that we should be mindful of as we work inside of our prisons and jails. And we often don't think about them. And I want to just point them and call some of them out because inside our prison jails, there are many students that have learning disabilities. And we need to be more conscious of how to work with those students, whether it's one-on-one through tutoring or whether it's special reading materials or other things. We have to be mindful of how that all works to create a stronger student. We also have an aging population in our prisons and jails, and that population can be tremendously valuable. I'm on the board of an organization called the Small Business Mentoring Initiative, which takes business professionals that have been really successful, and then we use them as mentors for new entrepreneurs that are coming up, that are part of the population. So why don't we use people that are successful inside our prisons and jails as our mentors and really give them a way of giving back to people that they're living with and share some of the expertise that they have. English language learning is taking a hit this in the last couple of years, in particular because of what's happening nationally politically. And what I would say to that is, it doesn't matter what's happening nationally. People that are in this country that want to learn the English language and if you're not speaking the English language, should have an opportunity to do so. And I was touched. We do the contract for DC jails, and I was in the DC jails last year and saw about 12 men huddled in the side of their unit. And they were all sitting together at two tables. And I was like, what's going on over there? Like, what are they doing? And the CO told me that, they were all there. They were learning themselves. There was no ESL support in the unit, and that's how they were all learning. So we should think about embedding ESL programming and ESL support inside of our units across the board. Working with marginalized populations often have, as I mentioned before, they have different triggers. They may have been told all their lives that, they weren't smart or they dropped out of school in the third or fourth grade, and not being able to say, having the freedom to say, I don't know my times tables, or I don't know how to add very well or read very well, is something that is really hard for an adult learner to do. And the more we can understand the way, how to deal with that and getting people into a safe place to do it, the better off we're going to be. Same thing with supervision restrictions on the outside as people leave our prisons and jails. We should know that, they should have some freedom to go to supervised into additional programs, and those restrictions that parole officers and probation officers put on individuals, they should be encouraging and working with people to make sure that they get to class on time. And also, we should be considering and thinking about our occupational licensing laws across the country and what really makes good sense for in the occupational sense. So I'm curious of what policies or practices are being changed, and what we can improve, what we could do better. I want to take just a really big brief pause because oh my gosh, I love this. So I just want to take a brief pause because I have so many comments here. But yes, people that are sharing stories of people that are inside trying to get a birth certificate, and people that are just as impacted behind the walls that are needing a calculator, or I will also say when it comes to tablets too, wow, so many things. I agree, and I apologize. Autism is an intellectual disability, but I think you guys know what I mean. I didn't wasn't talking just about autism in particular. I was talking about anything that runs into the intellectual disability realm. But yeah, there are a lot of these issues that crop up, and you have so many great questions and so many great points on this. I just wow. Amazing. But how is it that we can start moving the needle? What does that look like for all of us? And how do we go about doing it? And I think the first thing we need to recognize is that we are we are a system that's driven by money. You know, and that's the tragedy of a lot of this. There are private prisons out there, but funding is a big issue for many of us, and that there are some really big answers that we can look at when we talk about funding. Right now, there are more and more funding opportunities that are coming down for education. But part of that also means that we need to be thinking about how we partner. We cannot do this alone. We need employers working right next to adult literacy providers, working right in tandem with correctional educators, with correctional facilities. We need to embed that village and bring that village together when we talk about funding opportunities and not be so darn greedy because quite frankly, the funding and budget cuts that are happening across the United States are very real. But there are organizations that are out there. And John, you're right. There are budget cuts happening, but there are nonprofits like the PD Green program. There are resources like COABE that are, I call them free 95. Like they don't cost us anything. So thinking about how we reach out to some of those funding also means that we need to collaborate. We need to bring employers to the table, but there's also someone else we need to bring to the table. And we need to bring to the table those people with lived experience. We need to hear the voice from them as to what is it that helps you, that makes you tick? What is it that makes this program successful? And we don't do that. We don't bring our students in and say, what worked? What didn't? What is it that we should be doing differently or that we're not seeing? Because many of us, many that are on the call, have never been inside of a prison or jail as an inmate. And it is different. It is different than going to visit or having a family or friends that's inside than actually living inside of a prison and understanding the trauma or frustration when you're in a lockdown and you can't get to class or being shackled to a desk while you have to take a GED exam and you're struggling to try and figure out if you go to the bathroom, you're going to have to start the exam over again. And that recognition that, you don't want to have to do that. So you sit there and the humiliation, the inhumanity of some of it. So really asking of your students, what is it that you need? Look, I told somebody the story this morning that we were given cell phones during COVID for T-Mobile for people leaving our prisons and jails. And I asked them, can you share with me or what happened after 3 months? They got a cell phone, free service for a year, and a working cell phone they could use. We gave them all out as they were walking out the door. Here you go. And we went back and asked them the question, how'd it go? And 85% admitted that they sold their cell phones. They sold them. And then the next question I had was why? Like why? They had free service. Like why would anyone do that? And I didn't see it coming, but they sold them because they thought they were being tracked. They thought that someone was following, the government was going to be following them, and they didn't believe that the cell phone was theirs, and that was something that we didn't see. So now, whenever we give a device, whenever we give whether it's a laptop or a cell phone or whatever it is, when we give it to them, we give it to them so that they set it up. So that they're walking into a place where they're creating their own Gmail account. They're going to a place where, it becomes theirs. They're putting on what they need on there to be successful. So we need to ask the questions. And, there's a great line by Ted Lasso the show he said we should all he quotes Walt Whitman and he says we should be curious and not judgmental. And in the work that we do with our students, especially those that are justice impacted, we should be curious. We should be curious and not judgmental. We should be asking the questions, how can we do this better? Like, what is it that we're missing? And I would say that there are a lot of there are a lot of those situations that we face that are really difficult. The term lockdowns in New Mexico facility, I'm tasked with providing students with homework. Yeah. Providing homework packets when there is a lockdown and understanding maybe how to navigate it. And one of the things that we have found that works in that space where there is a lockdown is having people inside the units that are your tutors. They're your credible messengers. They're the people that can keep learning going on, even when there's a lockdown going on. So you're having one package of materials going inside the system so that they're able to help the students even when there is a lockdown. There's a bunch of comments on the workforce and wraparound support services. Yeah, making change happen and the tools and resources. I just want to spend a few minutes that when in this the PD Green program where I'm the CEO is it is the world's largest multi-state provider of academic support. We use college students. We're helping change not only getting people smarter, but we're changing culture. We're bringing people inside of facilities and working on the outside that are helping people achieve their academic goals. And I'd be happy to meet with anyone. We're expanding unbelievably fast. And I'm so proud of the work we're doing, but it's our tutors and our staff that are really passionate about this work and recognizing that if we can help people get smarter, that they're so much further on their way to being successful going through this journey of justice and reentry. We are national. We work with universities across the country. We're in facilities all across the country and adult education providers. We work with thousands and thousands of students every year, and we are definitely having a national impact. And if you're at all interested, it's pdgreen.org, www.pdgreen.org. PD Green was a disc jockey in Washington, D.C., and we were founded at Princeton University. So you definitely want to check that out. Here's my information. Feel free to send me an email. This link also has information directs you to our website. Definitely, you might want to check that out as well. And when you get the slide deck from me, this is the most important piece. I told you that there'd be resources. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages, 8 pages, 9 pages of resources that I hope that you will think about, that you'll go to and look at. And it's all relatively recent. Yes, I'm going to go back to my contact information so you have it. I want to kind of end with this, and is that, I'm really humbled to be doing the work that I do, and sitting kind of in the intersection of adult literacy, adult literacy, criminal justice, and workforce development. We have a huge problem in this country in that we have men and women that are behind the walls of our prisons and jails that are incredibly talented, that are incredibly brilliant, that all they really need is they just need to be seen. They just need to be recognized, and they need to understand that the work that we do as educators is all to help them get to a space where they're no longer behind the walls, a space where they're out in the world and they're successful. And I have this unbelievable respect and admiration for every single person on this call because without you, we can't make this change happen. Without you, we can't change the way we see the world of adult correctional and reentry education. I wanted to thank everybody that's on this call and a huge shout out to COABE. We have the conference coming up in Indianapolis, and I will put this out there before everyone jumps off that if you're going to COABE this year, that if you connect with me, I will buy you a free cup of coffee when we go to Indianapolis, or if you're up for a beverage of your choice when you're out there. And I'd be happy to connect with you and share more about the work that I do and also the work that COABE is doing in the correctional and reentry space. So the links to all of the resources are going to be shared out right after this. Bethel has all those. You're going to get them. So we'll send them. You'll get out there if you're registered and you're on here. That would be amazing. And if you want to catch up with me at COABE, I look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you very much, and have an incredibly blessed day. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you again to our sponsors at Essential Ed and Origin. If you could take the evaluation before you leave, and we hope you all have a great rest of your week. And hopefully it's getting warmer wherever you live. And everyone have a great rest of your Thursday. Thanks again, Jeff.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.